The sound of shattering glass echoed through the quiet neighborhood, followed by the unmistakable flicker of blue and red lights piercing the dark. At first glance, it looked like just another suburban disturbance, the kind that might be dismissed with a stern warning or a half-hearted apology. But this wasn't one of those nights. This was the kind of night that leaves questions unanswered and secrets unraveling at the seams. What started as a simple call to the police quickly morphed into a tangled web of identity, power, and consequence, one that would change lives forever. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the truth behind this story. The streets were lined with towering oaks, their leaves shifting lazily in the soft breeze. It was the kind of neighborhood where the hum of lawnmowers blended seamlessly with the laughter of kids on bikes, where neighbors waved without really knowing each other. Just outside Atlanta, this small community prided itself on its quiet charm until that day. Marcus, a reserved yet well-known figure in the area, had only recently moved into the neighborhood. A successful entrepreneur, he spent most of his time working quietly from home or tending to his immaculate front yard. Across the street lived Karen, a woman with a knack for keeping tabs on everyone else's business. Her days were punctuated by brisk walks, gossip sessions on the phone, and, as some whispered, a quickness to call the authorities when she felt her sense of order was disrupted. That sunny afternoon, Marcus was outside, minding his own business, as he often did. He adjusted the trim on his hedges, his headphones on, completely unaware of the storm brewing just a few doors down. Karen, meanwhile, stood at her window, her gaze fixed on Marcus with an intensity that suggested something more than mere curiosity. Her hand hovered over her phone. What followed was a single call, a decision she would soon come to regret. Asterisk. Karen stood by her kitchen window, the phone pressed tightly to her ear. From her vantage point, she had a clear view of Marcus moving back and forth from his driveway to his front door. He carried a box in one hand and a set of keys in the other, pausing occasionally to adjust the fit of his cap. To most, it would have been an ordinary scene, someone settling in, maybe finishing an errand. But to Karen, something about it felt off. Her voice was low but firm as she spoke into the phone, her eyes never leaving Marcus. "Yes, I'd like to report something suspicious. There's a man outside and I don't think he lives here. He's, moving things into the house. It doesn't look right." The dispatcher's calm questions barely registered with her as she rattled off the address and her assumptions. Minutes later, the familiar wail of sirens shattered the peace. Karen stood at her window, heart pounding, as a patrol car rounded the corner and stopped in front of Marcus's house. Two officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. Marcus, still holding a box, looked up in confusion as they approached. Neighbors peeked through curtains and cracked doors, their curiosity piqued by the commotion. Karen watched from the shadows, a mix of satisfaction and unease flickering across her face. She had expected this moment to bring clarity, to confirm her instincts. But as the officers spoke to Marcus, her certainty began to waver. The scene unfolding before her was not what she had imagined, and yet it was too late to stop it now. Asterisk. Marcus stood still on his porch, holding the box a little tighter as the officers began their questioning. The weight of the situation wasn't lost on him. Two uniformed officers stood in front of his home, questioning his every move, while his new neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Despite the tension in the air, he remained calm, introducing himself with the same professionalism he had always carried in his corporate life. "Good afternoon, officers," Marcus said, trying to ease the growing discomfort. "I just moved in yesterday, unloading some boxes. Everything's fine." The officers exchanged looks, still unsure, but Marcus's composed demeanor seemed to reassure them. Just as the tension was starting to lift, the screech of a front door being thrown open cut through the air. Karen appeared, storming out of her house, her face flushed with anger and disbelief. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice shaking with frustration. "Who are you to be here unloading boxes like you live here?" Her eyes flared with defiance, refusing to accept the calm explanation Marcus offered. Marcus didn't know what to say at first. The strange confrontation had taken a turn he hadn't expected, but he steadied himself, trying to remain the calm professional he always prided himself on being. "Ma'am, I live here. I bought the house just a couple of days ago." Karen wasn't listening. She waved her hands dismissively, each gesture more frantic than the last. "You don't belong here," she snapped. "I know everyone around here. You're not part of this neighborhood." Her voice cracked as she stepped closer, her accusations growing more heated by the second. At that moment, Marcus knew this wasn't just about a misunderstanding. Karen's words carried something deeper, something more personal. It was then that Marcus made a decision he would reveal who he really was. And maybe, just maybe, that would finally put an end to the tension. "Actually," he began, his voice steady, "I think you'll recognize me. I'm your boss. I run the company you work for." Karen's face froze, her eyes widening with disbelief. "What?" she gasped, the words barely escaping her lips. The shock was evident. You're my boss?" Marcus watched as her entire demeanor shifted. The aggressive stance, the certainty in her accusations, all of it faltered in an instant. "I couldn't believe it," Marcus later recounted, still stunned by the moment. "Her face turned pale when she realized who I was." Karen stumbled back, her hand hovering in the air as if searching for balance. The officers exchanged glances, but no one moved for a moment. In that brief, suspended time, the realization of her mistake seemed to hang heavy in the air. But Marcus wasn't sure whether she was more shocked by his identity or by the enormity of her error. What transpired on that quiet afternoon is not an isolated event. It is part of a much larger and deeply troubling pattern. Racial profiling, particularly against Black Americans, is a phenomenon that runs through many facets of life, from the streets to the workplace, and even into the homes of quiet suburban neighborhoods. For Marcus, the shock of the encounter with Karen was jarring, but for many others, it's an everyday reality. Studies show that Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be stopped by police than their white counterparts. These numbers reflect a harsh truth that continues to shape the experiences of millions. Despite the progress society likes to believe it has made, Black people are still frequently viewed with suspicion in spaces where they should feel safe and welcome, simply because of the color of their skin. Across the country, the pattern is all too familiar. From the infamous BBQ Becky in Oakland to the viral incident in Central Park involving Karen, who falsely accused a Black man of threatening her life, these stories are not rare outliers but part of a troubling trend. Calls to the police, often weaponized by racial biases, have led to unjust arrests, physical confrontations, and even loss of life. In fact, more than 911 calls, they represent a deeper issue at play, one that has been ingrained in the fabric of American society for centuries. According to Dr. Anthony Smith, a sociologist and expert on race relations, these situations can turn dangerous very quickly. What may start as an innocent assumption, an innocent call to authorities, can escalate and put lives at risk. These instances stem from biases that run so deep, they influence people's decisions before they even realize it. As the footage from Marcus's neighborhood fades, the connection becomes clear. What happened to Marcus is not just an anomaly, it's a tragic reality for many Black Americans, who are often seen as intruders in spaces they have every right to occupy. This incident highlights the unspoken tension that persists in communities across the nation, where suspicion often follows Black individuals into places that should be theirs too. Asterisk. Marcus could have easily let the incident slide, chalking it up to a misunderstanding and moving on with his life. But that's not the path he chose. Instead, he took this painful moment and turned it into an opportunity to raise awareness about the very real issue of racial profiling and the need for accountability, not just in his neighborhood, but in workplaces and communities everywhere. In the weeks that followed, Marcus began speaking out. He used his platform as a corporate executive to address the harmful impacts of unconscious bias in both personal and professional environments. At a company-wide meeting, he stood in front of his colleagues and shared the story. "This wasn't just about me, it's about all of us," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We need to confront these biases and ask ourselves, how can we do better?" His words weren't just heard by his team, they sparked a larger conversation, one that rippled through the company and beyond. Marcus became an advocate for open discussions about race and bias, encouraging his employees to reflect on their own assumptions and to take concrete steps to be more inclusive. The incident, though uncomfortable, became a catalyst for change within the workplace, a place where conversations about race had often been avoided or dismissed as too sensitive. But Marcus didn't stop there. He connected with local organizations working tirelessly to combat racial profiling and inequality, including the NAACP and the ACLU. Through partnerships and events, he helped amplify their voices, raising awareness about systemic issues and the urgent need for reform. Marcus also used his growing platform to encourage others to take action. "This isn't just about speaking out," he said in a public event. "It's about changing the systems that allow these biases to thrive. We need to do the work, every single day, and stand together to make sure this doesn't happen again." Marcus's courage to turn a personal experience into a call for systemic change created an invaluable ripple effect. The message he shared was clear. We all have a role to play in eradicating racial bias. We need to reflect, educate, and take active steps toward creating more inclusive communities. Now I pose this question to you. What would you have done in Karen's place? Would you have taken the time to consider the possibility that your assumptions were wrong before calling the authorities? Or would you have let your biases speak louder than the facts? It's not just about one moment or one mistake, it's about changing the way we see and treat each other. The question remains, are we willing to do the work? As the dust settled and the tension in the neighborhood slowly subsided, the consequences of that one phone call became clearer. For Karen, the embarrassment was undeniable. The realization that she had called the police on her own boss on a neighbor she had wrongly judged was a moment that left her reeling. But this story, as much as it highlighted her mistake, goes far beyond personal embarrassment. It's a stark reminder of a deeper issue that continues to affect people every single day. Racism thrives when it goes unchallenged, when people choose silence over action, and when biases are allowed to fester unchecked. It's easy to pretend it's not there, to ignore the discomfort it creates, but the truth is, racism doesn't disappear just because we choose not to confront it. And so, it's up to all of us to challenge it no matter how uncomfortable or difficult that may be. The story of Marcus, his strength, and his decision to turn this painful experience into a call for change is a reminder that the fight for justice isn't just about one individual standing up. It's about all of us coming together, acknowledging the deep-rooted biases in society, and working to dismantle them, one conversation, one action at a time. In the aftermath, Marcus didn't let his experience define him. Instead, he used it to create opportunities for growth for himself, for his community, and for the workplace. As we see in the images of diverse communities coming together, raising their voices for racial justice and standing in solidarity, the message becomes clear. The power of change is in our hands. In the final moments of this story, as Marcus smiles with his family in front of his home, we're reminded that change is possible. It's not easy, and it won't happen overnight, but every step forward is progress. The final message is simple. Racism isn't just personal, it's systemic. And if we're serious about creating a more just and equitable society, we must all do our part to change it. We can't afford to remain silent. We have to challenge the biases in our own lives, in our workplaces, and in the systems that surround us. Because until we do, the cycle will continue. Racism isn't just personal, it's systemic. Let's do our part to change it. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters. If this story moved you, kindly like, subscribe, and share it with someone you love.